I stood frozen, my heart pounding as the fine china plate shattered at my feet, the crash echoing through Rosie's elegant dining room. It was my 65th birthday, a night I'd hoped would mend the rift with my son Daniel. But instead, his wife, Vanessa, towered over me, her voice venomous. "You meddling hag, you never should have come," she screamed, her eyes blazing with contempt. Every head turned, their stares burning into me, but Daniel sat silent, his gaze fixed on his wineglass. The humiliation stung worse than the sauce splattered on my dress. I'd spent years quietly supporting their family, hiding my role as the powerhouse behind Peterson Builders, even owning their home in secret. But that night, something snapped inside me. 3 days later, Vanessa would open a letter from my attorney, and the truth I'd buried for so long would unravel everything. What was the secret that could tear a family apart or bring it back together? Join me, Margaret Thompson, on a journey of betrayal, resilience, and redemption. Where are you reading from? Let me know. The clatter of that plate hitting the floor still rings in my ears, a sound as sharp and jagged as the pieces of my heart scattered across the restaurant's polished tiles. Rossi's, a chic Italian spot nestled in our quiet Chicago suburb, was supposed to be the backdrop for a joyful reunion. I'd spent hours getting ready, slipping into my favorite navy dress, the one George, my late husband, always said brought out the blue in my eyes. Around my neck hung the sapphire earrings he'd given me on our 20th anniversary, a reminder of the love we'd shared before his heart attack stole him away 6 years ago. In my purse, I'd tucked a scrapbook, its pages filled with photos of Daniel. His first bike ride, his gap-toothed grin at 7, his high school graduation. I'd imagined us flipping through it over tiramisu, laughing, reconnecting. For months, my calls to Daniel had gone unanswered, our conversations reduced to hurried texts. When he called to invite me to this dinner, hope had flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. But the moment I sat down at the table, that hope began to crumble. The air was thick with tension, like a storm brewing just out of sight. Vanessa barely acknowledged me, her eyes glued to her phone, her manicured nails tapping out a rhythm of dismissal. Daniel, my only son, seemed on edge, his fingers fidgeting with his watch, his smile strained. I tried to break the ice, my voice bright despite the growing knot in my stomach. "How are Lily and Max doing?" I asked, desperate for any scrap of news about my grandchildren. I hadn't seen them in nearly a year, their absence a constant ache. "They're fine," Vanessa snapped, not bothering to look up. Her tone was a blade, sharp and cold. I swallowed the hurt, forcing a smile. "I brought a little gift for Lily's birthday next week, just a small doll I thought she'd love." That's when Vanessa's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing to icy slits. "We've told you, Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Lily doesn't need your thrift store junk." The words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Daniel shifted in his seat, his discomfort palpable. "Vanessa, please," he murmured, his voice barely audible. But she wasn't done. "No, Daniel," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm done with her trying to worm her way into our kids' lives when she was such a terrible mother to you." I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands trembling in my lap. "Terrible mother?" The accusation was a knife to my chest. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice barely holding together. Vanessa leaned forward, her voice growing louder, drawing the attention of nearby tables. "Always playing the victim, aren't you? Poor, lonely Margaret rattling around in her crumbling old house. If you hadn't smothered Daniel his whole life, he wouldn't need a therapist." "Therapist?" The word landed like a thunderbolt. I turned to Daniel, my eyes pleading for clarity. "Daniel, what's she saying?" He wouldn't meet my gaze, his focus fixed on the napkin in his hands, twisting it into knots. "It's nothing, Mom," he mumbled, but Vanessa pounced. "It's not nothing," she insisted, her voice rising to a near shout. "Tell her how you needed therapy because of her, how she controlled every choice you made, never letting you breathe." The waiter arrived then, awkwardly placing plates of pasta in front of us, his eyes darting between Vanessa's fury and my stunned silence. I sat frozen, my mind reeling. Had I been controlling? Had I hurt Daniel without knowing? The question swirled, but before I could reach for his hand, Vanessa snapped. In one swift motion, she stood, grabbed my plate of fettuccine, and hurled it to the floor. The crash was deafening, sauce splattering across my dress and shoes, the shards of china glinting under the restaurant's soft lights. "You meddling hag! You never should have come!" she screamed, her words echoing in the now silent room. Every pair of eyes was on us, the weight of their stares crushing me. I looked to Daniel, my voice breaking. "Daniel, please." "But my son," the boy I'd raised alone after George died when he was just 10. The boy I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college. The boy I'd loved with every fiber of my being sat there, silent. Not a word in my defense, not a glance in my direction. His shame wasn't for Vanessa's outburst, but for me. My hands shook as I grabbed my purse, my legs unsteady as I stood. "I'm sorry I ruined your evening," I managed to say, clinging to the last shred of my dignity. I walked out of Rossi's, head held high despite the tears streaming down my face, the sapphire earrings catching the light as if mocking my pain. In the parking lot, I collapsed into my car, the sobs coming in waves. Through the restaurant's window, I saw Daniel and Vanessa resume their meal, their laughter faint but unmistakable, as if I'd never been there at all. I drove home to the ranch house George and I had bought 35 years ago, its familiar walls closing in around me. The living room where Daniel took his first steps, the porch where he'd had his first kiss, the kitchen where he told me he was marrying Vanessa. It all felt hollow now, haunted by memories of a family that no longer existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in George's old recliner, surrounded by photo albums, the scrapbook I'd brought to dinner untouched beside me. Had I been a terrible mother? Had I smothered Daniel as Vanessa claimed? The questions gnawed at me, each one a fresh wound, but as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, something shifted inside me. The tears dried, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just a grieving widow or a rejected mother. I was Margaret Thompson. And I'd spent too long letting Vanessa's cruelty define me. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in ages. "Tom," I said, my voice steady for the first time in days, "it's Margaret. I need your help." By Monday, Vanessa would receive a letter from my attorney, a letter that would set in motion a reckoning no one saw coming. As dawn broke over my quiet Chicago suburb, the sting of that night at Rossi's still lingered, the shattered plate a cruel echo of my fractured family. I'd walked out of the restaurant with my head high, but inside I was crumbling. Vanessa's venomous words, "You meddling hag, you never should have come," and Daniel's silence had cut deeper than I could admit. Yet, in the stillness of my sleepless night, surrounded by photo albums in George's old recliner, a spark of resolve ignited. I wasn't just the grieving widow or the mother Vanessa painted as a villain. I was Margaret Thompson, and I'd hidden my strength for too long. When I called my old friend Tom Harper, a lawyer who'd known me since our Northwestern days, I knew it was time to unveil the truth. "Tom," I said, my voice steady, "I need your help." By Monday, Vanessa would receive a letter that would unravel the secrets I'd kept to protect my son's pride. Secrets about the house he lived in, the money he thought was his, and the empire I'd built in the shadows. The truth was coming, and it would change everything. Sitting in my kitchen, the familiar hum of the refrigerator was the only sound breaking the silence of that early morning. The ranch house George and I had bought 35 years ago felt like a museum of memories. Daniel's crayon drawings still tucked in a drawer, the scuff marks on the hallway floor from his toy trucks. But now, those memories were tainted by Vanessa's accusations. Had I smothered Daniel? Had I been a terrible mother? The questions churned. But as I sipped my coffee, I pushed them aside. I needed to focus on what I could control. For years, I'd let Daniel and Vanessa believe I was just a modest widow scraping by on a pension, a narrative I'd crafted to avoid bruising their egos. The truth was far different, and it was time they knew. After George's heart attack 6 years ago, when Daniel was just 32, I'd been left to raise our son alone and keep Peterson Builders, our family construction firm, afloat. George had been the charming front man, shaking hands and closing deals, but I was the backbone, crunching numbers, negotiating contracts, and steering the company through lean years. When he died, everyone expected me to sell. Instead, I took the reins, quietly transforming Peterson Builders into one of Illinois' top construction firms. I never flaunted it, living simply in our old house, driving a modest sedan, and keeping my wealth under wraps. I didn't need the spotlight, I needed my family. But that family had drifted further away with each passing year, Vanessa's influence growing like a shadow over Daniel's heart. The biggest secret I'd kept was about their home. 8 years ago, Daniel had his eye on a charming craftsman house in a leafy neighborhood near Lily and Max's school. He dreamed of raising his kids there, but his banking salary couldn't stretch that far. "Let me help," I'd offered, my voice soft but earnest. "No, Mom," he'd said, his pride as firm as his jaw. "We'll manage." So I'd found another way. Through Peterson Builders, I bought the house and arranged a private sale at half its market value, making Daniel believe he'd snagged a deal from a motivated seller. Every month, his mortgage payments went straight into a trust I'd set up for Lily and Max's education. He never suspected I still held the deed. It was my way of giving without taking away his dignity. Or so I thought. Then there was Vanessa's credit card. She loved her designer handbags, spa retreats, and luxury boutiques, racking up bills that Daniel's salary couldn't possibly cover. I'd set up a special account years ago, telling Daniel it was a perk from his job, but I was the one quietly covering the difference. Each time Vanessa swiped that card for a $5,000 zero-cents dress or a weekend at a high-end resort, I paid the balance, believing it kept me tethered to their lie. I told myself it was what any mother would do: help without asking for credit, love without expecting love in return. But as I sat there, the memory of Vanessa's cruelty at Rossi's burning in my chest, I realized I'd been enabling her. My silence had let her paint me as the enemy, a meddling hag who'd smothered her son. No more. I stood and walked to the living room where the scrapbook I'd brought to the restaurant lay untouched. Flipping through it, I saw Daniel's toothy grin at his 5th birthday, his arms around me at his college graduation. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't just from pain. They were from anger at Vanessa for poisoning my son against me, at myself for letting it happen. I'd spent years tiptoeing around Daniel's pride, hiding my success to avoid making him feel small. But that night at Rossi's had shown me the cost of my silence. Vanessa's outburst wasn't just an attack, it was a wake-up call. I closed the scrapbook and picked up the phone again. Tom Harper's voice was warm but professional when he answered. "Margaret, what's going on?" I took a deep breath. "I need you to draft a letter to Vanessa. Freeze the account tied to her credit card and prepare documents to show Daniel the truth about their house. It's time." Later that day, I drove to Tom's office downtown, this Chicago skyline a blur through my windshield. The leather chair in his office felt cool against my back as he spread out the paperwork I'd asked for. "You sure about this, Margaret?" he asked, peering over his glasses. Tom and I went way back. He'd been a fresh-faced lawyer when George and I were building our business, and he knew the weight of what I was about to do. "I've never been sure," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "They need to know the truth about the house, the money, everything." Tom nodded, his eyes kind but serious. "This will shake things up. You ready for the fallout?" I thought of Daniel's silence at the restaurant, Vanessa's venom, the years I'd spent on the sidelines of my own family. "I'm ready," I said. "It's time for honesty." Tom drafted the letter to Vanessa, informing her that the credit card she'd been using, linked to an account she thought was Daniel's, was frozen, and that I'd been supplementing it for years. He also prepared a folder of documents, the deed to their house, bank statements showing my monthly payments to cover Vanessa's spending, tax records proving I was the sole owner of Peterson Builders. As I drove home, the weight of those secrets felt lighter, like a burden I was finally ready to set down. I didn't know how Daniel would react, but I knew one thing: I couldn't keep living in the shadows of my own life. That night, as I sat in the quiet of my house, I looked at a photo of George and me on our wedding day, his arm around me, both of us laughing. "I've got this," I whispered, feeling his presence in the stillness. The truth was coming, and with it, a chance to reclaim my family or lose it forever. My phone rang that afternoon, shattering the quiet of my kitchen. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, and my heart skipped a beat. I answered, keeping my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside. "Hello, Daniel." His voice was taut, edged with anger. "Mom, what the hell is going on? Vanessa's card was declined at Saks, and some lawyer's letter says you've been paying for it." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Yes, Daniel, it's true. We need to talk about your finances, your house, everything." Silence stretched across the line, heavy and tense. "What about my house?" he finally asked, his voice tight with disbelief. "It's in my name," I said, my tone even but firm, always has been. "I've been helping you financially for years." Another pause, longer this time. "That's impossible," he stammered. "I pay the mortgage every month." "You do?" I replied. "To a trust I set up for Lily and Max. Come over this afternoon, Daniel. I'll show you the documents." I hung up before he could argue, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with a fierce determination. For too long, I'd let Vanessa's lies push me to the edges of my son's life. That ended today. 2 hours later, the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I opened it to find Daniel standing there alone, his face a storm of confusion and anger. "Prove it," he demanded, brushing past me into the dining room. I'd laid out the documents Tom had prepared, the deed to their Craftsman house, bank statements detailing my payments to Vanessa's credit card, tax records confirming my ownership of Peterson Builders. Daniel's eyes scanned the papers, his hands shaking as he flipped through them. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, his voice cracking. I sat across from him, feeling the weight of my 65 years. "Because you made it clear you didn't want my help," I said softly. "You wanted to do it on your own, and I respected that. But you needed support, and I wanted to be part of your life, even if it was in secret." He looked up, his eyes searching mine. "Vanessa thinks you're doing this to punish her for the restaurant." I held his gaze. "And what do you think?" For the first time in years, he really looked at me, not as the controlling mother Vanessa had painted, but as his mother, the woman who'd sacrificed everything for him. "I don't know you at all," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The next morning, a car door slammed outside, rattling the windows. I was in the kitchen, calmly stirring honey into my tea, bracing myself for what was coming. Daniel burst through the door without knocking, Vanessa trailing behind, her face flushed with fury, her designer purse clutched like a shield. "Good morning," I said evenly. "Tea, anyone?" Vanessa's eyes blazed. "Cut the act, Margaret. What kind of sick game are you playing?" I settled into George's recliner, meeting her glare with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "No game, Vanessa, just the truth." Daniel paced, his anger reignited. "You can't just freeze her accounts. Her card was declined in front of everyone at Saks. Do you know how humiliating that was?" I raised an eyebrow, almost amused. "Humiliation at a department store? Is that what matters most to you right now?" Vanessa stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You're trying to control us, just like you controlled Daniel his whole life." I set my teacup down, the clink loud in the tense room. "Is that what you believe, Daniel, that I controlled you?" He stopped pacing, his fists clenched. "You never let me decide anything. Sports, college, nothing. You always had to have your say." My heart ached, but I kept my voice steady. "I was a single mother, Daniel, raising you alone after your father died. I wasn't perfect, but everything I did was because I loved you." Vanessa scoffed, her voice dripping with scorn. Love, you're manipulating him with your money. I reached for the folder on the table and handed it to Daniel. These are your financial records, Daniel. Your salary doesn't cover Vanessa's spending. The $20,000 0-cent spa trips, the secret withdrawals. His hands shook as he opened the folder, his eyes scanning the numbers. What's elite wellness retreat? His little what? He asked, his voice low. Vanessa's face paled, but she recovered quickly. It's nothing. I tilted my head, my voice soft but pointed. It's a discreet clinic in California, known for cosmetic procedures. I review all transactions on my accounts. Vanessa, your card is linked to me. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he turned to her. What about these withdrawals? $10,000, 0 cents here, $25,000, 0 cents there. Explain. Vanessa grabbed her purse, her voice rising to a near shriek. This is ridiculous. I'm not standing here being interrogated by a bitter old woman. She stormed toward the door, pausing to glare at Daniel. Are you coming? He stood frozen, the folder still in his hands, torn between his wife and the truth unfolding before him. I need time, he said, his voice barely audible. Vanessa's laugh was bitter. Unbelievable. She's done it again. She slammed the door behind her, the sound echoing through the house. Daniel sank onto the couch, the folder still clutched in his hands. She's been lying to me, he said, more to himself than to me. I sat beside him, my heart pounding. I stayed silent for years, Daniel, because I didn't want to lose you. Every time I tried to get close, Vanessa pushed me away with lies, saying I refused to attend Lily's christening, that I criticized your parenting. I was never invited to those events. He looked at me, doubt clouding his features. She wouldn't. I held his gaze. She did, and I let it happen because I was afraid of losing you completely. But I can't do that anymore. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like George's it made my chest ache. I need to think, he said, standing abruptly. As he left, the folder still in his hands, I felt a flicker of hope and fear. The truth was out, but would it bring us closer or tear us apart for good? Days later, my phone rang again. It was Daniel, his voice tight but controlled. Mom, can I come over? My heart raced as I agreed. 20 minutes later, he stood in my living room, pale and sleepless, an envelope in his hand. I found something, he said, his tone flat, almost hollow. He handed me bank statements, not the ones I'd shown him, but new ones. Accounts I didn't recognize, transactions to places like Bahamas Private Banking Ltd. My stomach sank. What is this? I asked, though I feared I knew. Vanessa's been hiding a secret account, Daniel said, his voice cracking. She's transferred over $400,000, 0 cents, our money, into it for years. I sat down heavily, the papers trembling in my hands. Oh, Daniel, I'm so sorry. He laughed, a bitter sound with no joy. You're sorry? I'm the one who should apologize. You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen. I believed her lies about you because it was easier than facing the truth. He sank onto the couch, his shoulders slumped. There's more, he continued, his voice breaking. I hired a private investigator. It's worse than I thought. My eyes widened, but I stayed silent, letting him speak. The investigator had uncovered not just one affair, but several, stretching back years. Vanessa had been planning to leave with Lily and Max, waiting until she'd squirreled away enough money to start over in the Bahamas with another man. She was going to take my kids, Daniel said, his voice hollow. I reached for his hand, and to my surprise, he let me take it. The children, I said softly. How are they? Confused, he replied, his eyes glistening. Vanessa told them I'm on a business trip. I haven't figured out how to tell them their mother's been lying to us all. We sat in silence, the weight of his words settling over us like a heavy fog. Then Daniel straightened, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. Can the kids and I stay here for a while, just until I figure things out? My heart swelled, a warmth I hadn't felt in years spreading through me. Of course, I said, my voice thick with emotion. This is your home, always. 2 weeks later, my quiet house was transformed. Lily, 8, and Max, 6, filled it with laughter, their toys scattered across the living room, their drawings taped to the fridge. Daniel took a leave from his banking job, working remotely to focus on them. The divorce proceedings were messy. Vanessa fought for everything, claiming Daniel and I had conspired to ruin her. But the evidence of her theft and affairs was undeniable. One crisp December morning, Daniel received a letter from her lawyer. "She's dropping the custody fight," he said, disbelief in his voice as he showed me a grainy photo of Vanessa boarding a plane in Miami with a man I didn't know. She's been living there for a month, missing court because she wasn't even in the state. I stared at the photo, stunned. She abandoned them. Daniel nodded, a mix of relief and sadness in his eyes. "She'll take supervised visits twice a month and a lump sum payment to avoid charges." He chose peace over vengeance, finalizing the settlement. The Craftsman house was sold, the proceeds going into a trust for Lily and Max. We found a new home, a bright, airy place with a big yard near their school. Daniel insisted on paying half, calling it a partnership. "It's not about pride anymore, Mom," he said. "It's about building something together." As we unpacked, I stepped fully into my role as CEO of Peterson Builders, no longer hiding my success. A local paper ran a headline, "Grandmother revealed as construction tycoon." Lily beamed, showing it to her friends. "My grandma's a hero," she said. One evening, my friend Ellen brought wine and a truth she'd kept for years. She'd seen Vanessa with another man at a hotel, and at a gala, Vanessa had bragged about exploiting my financial support. I'd been played, but now I was free. As Lily and Max ran through the sprinkler in our new yard, Daniel sat beside me, a real smile on his face. "I'm sorry, Mom, for believing her lies," he said. I squeezed his hand. "We're here now. That's what matters." For the first time in years, my house felt like a home again, filled with love and possibility. Standing on the back porch of our new home, I listened to the gentle chime of a wind chime, a housewarming gift from Richard, an old friend whose warm smile had sparked something new in me. The stars above our Chicago suburb glittered, as if celebrating the life we were building. Lily's laughter echoed from the yard, where she and Max chased fireflies, their joy filling spaces that had been silent too long. Daniel joined me, a mug of hot chocolate in his hand. "I can't remember the last time I saw you this happy," he said, his voice soft. I smiled, my heart lighter than it had been in years. "It's been a while," I admitted. "This house, you and the kids, it's more than I dared hope for." He nodded, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "I was blind, Mom. I let Vanessa's lies tear us apart. But you fought for us, for the truth." I squeezed his hand. "Sometimes love means fighting, even when it hurts." The divorce was finalized, Vanessa's influence fading like a bad dream. I'd also started seeing Richard, our coffee dates stirring a flutter of anticipation I hadn't felt since George. One morning I drove to the lake where George and I used to picnic, the sunrise painting the sky in hues of hope. "I'm ready to live again," I whispered, feeling his presence in the breeze. Back home, Lily and Max begged for my pancakes, blueberries scattered on the counter. Our new home was alive with love, a stark contrast to the pain of that night at Rossi's. I'd reclaimed my life, not just as Daniel's mother or George's widow, but as Margaret, a woman with dreams of her own. The journey had been brutal, the truth a jagged pill, but it forged something stronger. Daniel and I were partners now, bound by honesty, not secrets. My wealth, once hidden, now built a future for my grandchildren. Vanessa's betrayal had lost its power, her absence a relief. As I looked at the stars, peace settled over me. What would you do in my shoes? Have you faced a betrayal that tested your strength? Share your story below and tell me what city you're reading from. Let's see how far this tale travels.